Brock is out there. I know Brock.
There's 4 o'clock. My cuckoo clocks will go in a minute.
That's great.
All right, well, we'll go with John's cuckoo clock as the official start time.
Perfect.
Welcome, everybody, and happy Founders Day to all the Phi Gamma Delta brothers out there. Thank you for joining for our mental health discussion.
Sorry.
Our conversation on mental health. So, just a few housekeeping things as we get ready. My name is Lauren Lief. I serve as the Director of Education and actually just celebrated my 1-year anniversary on staff a few days ago. So I've been lucky enough to serve the fraternity for an entire year. Just a few things to know if you haven't used Zoom a whole lot. We'll be using the Q&A feature. So if you see the kind of gray black bar, you can go ahead and click where it says Q&A and send questions in for our esteemed panel that we have joining us. There's also a chat box. So talk back to folks, you know, make this interactive with us, and we're excited to dive in. So recognizing that we are going to be talking about kind of a tough having a tough conversation for many of us, we do want to make sure that you're out there and you're taking care of yourself. So just some resources here. These are good numbers to just have in your phone. Whether you need it, a friend comes to need it, you never know. So this is an appropriate time during a presentation to take out your phone and add those numbers and put them into your cell phone. Again, this might be some tough topics. So if you need to get up and walk away, nobody can see, no one will know. We don't see your videos, so please take care of yourself during this. That is one of the most important things I can give you. So we've got about an hour together, and we'll start off with panelist introductions here in just a minute, and then we'll go into questions, and be sure to save plenty of time to answer any questions that you all submit using the Zoom Q&A feature. All right, first up, I will turn the mic over to John so that he can introduce himself to you all.
Hello, everybody. Am I on? There, okay. My name is John Starzynski. I'm a graduate of the University of Western Ontario Lambda Omega chapter. My mental health history goes back a number of years. My mother and both my grandmothers lived with depression, and I, in 1990, had what they would have called in the old days a nervous breakdown. I became very ill with bipolar disorder. Bipolar is one of those things where you either fly very high or you fly very low. And I was doing that for about a year before I finally just wore out and collapsed and ended up in the hospital. I get out of the hospital, and 2 years later, I had a suicide attempt. So I was in psychiatric hospital for 4 months, and then processed with my psychiatrist and counselor and finding the right medication after about 5 years. And it did take 5 years because there were about 35 different medications and augmentations and experiments. We finally found the cocktail. because of my experience with this, I became involved with the Lawyers Assistance Program in Ontario. So we help lawyers judge with issues, stress, burnout, addictions, and mental health. I've had extensive training in a lot more than mental health issues. So I spent an awful lot of time talking to people and helping them deal with whatever issues they were dealing with. It was a great experience. And I'm just grateful that for all the people in my life that have helped me get through. We're going to be talking a little more later about how what I do on a regular basis. But bipolar disorder is one of those things that is very hard to nail down. It's like putting your finger on a piece of liquid mercury. It squirts away from you. And it did take an awful lot to settle down. But fortunately, I'm here, I'm healthy, I'm thriving, and I'm very, very glad to be a part of this. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing that. John also serves as the president of the Mood Disorder Society of Canada, so we're very lucky to have him serve on our panel. All right, next up we have Sonnie.
Hey, how you guys doing? So I'm Sonnie Wooden. I went to University of Iowa from 2015 to 2018. Right now I'm at the University of Pennsylvania getting my Master's of Fine Art. So as you can see here, filmmaker, writer, photographer, and sometimes a poet, depending on the day. But a lot of my work revolves around the Black American experience very heavily due to the fact that I grew up around a very, very Black household, and I'm very interested in the way lives operate at home, and more broadly, what are the cultural kind of shifts and the cultural kind of landmarkers of a like Black family's household, or how they talk to one another linguistically. Black people don't necessarily speak Spanish or Mandarin. You know, we both in America speak English just as like our white counterparts, and how to differentiate what quote unquote slang means when in actuality is actual kind of language of a people. But that's just what I'm doing here at Penn. But I found myself in Fiji around 2015 because one night I had a really bad night. I was thinking about suicide, sitting in my car, and I said, okay, I'll call my girlfriend at the time, go in my apartment, and she was just try to decompress. And at that time, I got a phone call, and that phone call was from my friend whose house I had just left like 45 minutes before. I get the call, I answer. He said, so-and-so shot himself. And that really threw me off. I didn't know what actually happened. I wasn't very sure if he was just cleaning his gun and shot himself or some freak accident. But to my surprise and to my very sad thoughts, it came to be true that he did kill himself. And I actually drove to the house before I knew that is what happened, and we found him there. They brought his body down, and I kind of went through this entire process of what happens in a suicide. The same night I was thinking about it, so it really threw me off, and it really messed with me for a very long time. And then I've been in therapy in and out since I was very young. I was a very weird child. I just liked being left alone and reading, and I was a very angry kid who played sports a lot. But after I lost my friend, I moved away to Iowa and said it was time for a fresh start to really change who I am, how I see myself. And I ended up joining Fiji because my friend who killed himself was actually a sick guy at Miami of Ohio, and actually went there because of him originally before I ended up transferring later on to Iowa. I said, no sick guy, I'm a rush, and a bunch of great guys at Fiji and Iowa, or Phi Gamma, what the Southern guys say, Brad Orpano, Reed Roos, Louis Hartzog, Stock, all these great guys, Alex Kronk, some of you may know Kronk, actually like brought me in, and it was a new family, it was a new beginning. So, you know, I've always kind of struggled with these things, and I'm also an artist, so I'm very sensitive, which isn't always good, but I think girls kind of like it sometimes, so that's cool. Yeah.
Thanks, Sonnie, for being vulnerable with the group and sharing that. We'll share Sonnie's website at the end of our time together, and I will be the first to admit that I got lost looking at your art. So thank you for sharing that with the world and sharing your time.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Ross.
I'm unmuted. I'm good.
You're good.
Great to be on this panel. Great to have this focus on mental health for Mental Health Awareness Month during quarantine. My name is Ross Szabo, and I have my own personal story. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was in high school. When I was a senior in high school, I was hospitalized for attempting to take my own life. But on the outside, like, I had this huge kind of perfect image, president of my class, varsity athlete, all kinds of youth organizations and everything. But on the inside, I was hiding a lot and just really kept trying to hide that depression before it kind of blew up. Eventually, I graduated from high school, went to college, and then I did the really difficult thing of in and out of colleges for like the next 6 years until I found a way to graduate and focus on health. Along the way, I started sharing my story with bipolar disorder when I was 17. And then when I was around, I guess, 23, I became the director of the National Mental Health Awareness Campaign. So at the time that campaign was launched, it was the first public health approach to mental health in the country. It was started by the Clinton administration in 1999. And when I came on in 2002, we did all kinds of huge public service announcements with MTV and like interviews and all kinds of big events to try and get mental health to the forefront. In 2006, we created the first youth mental health speakers bureau in the country. And then by 2010, I had written a book, spoken to a bunch of people, trained a bunch of speakers, and I burned out. So I did what anyone does when they burn out. I joined the Peace Corps. I was just like, oh man, I'm so exhausted. I'm gonna go live in Southern Africa. I lived in Botswana for 2.5 years. When I came back, I started my own company to create mental health curriculum for people of all ages, because I thought it was really important to teach mental health the same way we teach physical health. So I launched a curriculum after the name of my book called Behind Happy Faces. And then around 2016, I was consulting at UCLA, and they were like, hey, we're starting a middle school, high school on our campus for kids in grades 6 through 12. If you got to start a school, what would you do? And I was like, if I got to start a school, we would have a class where we teach mental health once a week, and you learn about your mental health once a week from grade 6 through grade 12 so that you can actually have skills to apply in your life. And so I got hired as a founding faculty member of Geffen Academy at UCLA. And my main job right now is to teach at the school and create a program and a mentoring program. And then also we're developing ways that the program can be taught around the world. So I do a lot of teaching. I still do a lot of speaking, and my curriculum is still used worldwide. And Fiji is one of the biggest partners I have with the curriculum. So a lot of members are already using Behind Happy Faces.
Thank you, Ross. We know you're a busy guy, so we really do appreciate your time joining on Day of Brotherhood.
Thanks.
All right, we will now hear from Glenn Moore.
All right, well, about 20 years ago, I started noticing, I was slow to notice them, but there were many changes going on in my life. And towards the end of that little pre-diagnosis period, I was tending to sleep, you know, on a weekend, I could sleep 18 to 20 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday, just sleeping all day. Things that I used to enjoy provided no enjoyment to me. My mind could always talk me out of doing things. I still kept up appearances. I still wore the mask. I was able to always make last minute saves so that no one would do it. But I grew up in a time when, you know, people didn't ever talk about depression. It wasn't something that you talked about in polite society. And in, you know, all of my classes, I never heard about depression, so I couldn't diagnose. So one day I was up at the gym, there was a sign right in front of me, and it's, you know, it gave you 10 risk factors of of a disease, and I could mark off 7 of them honestly, and it was, lo and behold, I must have diabetes. And so I went to the doctor and said, I think I have diabetes. He did the blood test. You don't have diabetes. And he said, do you think you might be suffering from depression? And when he gave me that diagnosis, I was so pissed off, honestly. I thought it was a quack. You know, I had nothing to be sad about. I came from a family that loves me, had a job, you know, everything in life. I've never had to deal with any serious hardships. And so it just really, really irritated me. And so went from that period for another month. And then, you know, I slowly came around that indeed I did have depression, and that some of the messages up here weren't as positive as they should be. But the diagnosis was important because, you know, it's almost a daily battle, and the battle is joined. I know what the diagnosis is. I know how to fight and to try and make things right. But that's my story.
Thank you, Glenn. Glenn's also given uncountable hours to the fraternity, so thanks for joining our panel and for all everything that you've given. So I think it's also important to note that Glenn was behind the Immortal Phi Gamma campaign, so that's another claim to fame. So thank you for being here and sharing your story with us as well.
My pleasure.
All right, and we will hear from Colin, certainly not least.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everyone. I'm Colin Bye. I graduated from Davidson College in 2017, the Delta Kappa chapter, and I am really happy to be a part of this panel and to listen and learn with all of you. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got a passion for acting, among a lot of other things, and after graduating school, I moved to New York City, and there I started working with the Stella Adler Studio of Acting. And they have an incredible outreach program that I got involved with that brings theater and community to places where those don't really exist. So I was working in rehab facilities, jails, underfunded schools. It became really clear to me how important it is for folks to have a sense of connection to themselves and to each other to make it through tough times. And so since then, I became committed to supporting that connection in my own way and really doing some investigation and figuring out how I can best support that both in myself and in other people. And somewhere along the journey, I discovered mindfulness practices like meditation and yoga, which have become the core of what I teach and how I live. I became a certified yoga teacher at the Kripalu Center in Western Massachusetts. And I started Manscending, which is a company to bring guys, particularly fraternity men, the tools to build inner stability. And that's the work that drives me right now. And I look forward to continue learning and continue sharing. So grateful to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Colin. All right, we'll jump into our questions. So our first question goes to John and to Colin. How do you define good mental health, and what techniques are important for you to use to maintain good mental health?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The mental health is such it's a broad, it can mean many, many things. For me, what it means is that I feel confident in myself. I feel that life is under control. I just feel good about myself. Now that's pretty airy-fairy. But I know when I'm not feeling good that I don't feel like that. And there are basic things I do to make sure that I'm well. First of all, there's physically, my mother was right. You've got to get 8 hours of sleep a night. You've got to eat realistically and well, and you've got to get some exercise. Very, very simple things. If you do those things, I find that my life is pretty much under control, so I physically feel well. Cutting out alcohol, those have they're just things that invade your body. No judgment for anybody out there who. I've also told to cut out diet sodas because of the junk that's in it. They can work hell with your neurotransmitters. A friend that I've had since 7. I talk to him every day, and we just touch base. He and my wife died a few years ago, but they were really my rocks. So they could tell, usually in an instant, whether or not I was not well. And the beauty of having them is that they loved me enough, and I loved them enough, that they could confront me in a loving way and say, something's not right, something's going on, what's happening, what can we do? And I'll tell you, there were a number of times they got me out of tough situations just because I was not aware that I was going off the rails. Emotionally, that is really, really important for me to have that kind of connection. My wife died a few years ago, and my sons, they're 42 and 40 now. And of course, they've grown up with me, and they can pretty well nail me as well. And my older son particularly, he knows when I'm not giving him a straight answer. He knows my moods. He knows the words I use. That's important. The last one is spirituality. Now, this could mean religion. It could mean worship. It could mean prayer. It could mean any number of things. It could be a higher power. It could be something greater than ourselves. I use a whole combination of these to keep myself grounded and keep myself well. Colin's going to talk about mindfulness. I meditate, and I use that as a way to figure out when my thinking is wrong. There's 15 styles of distorted thinking. I have 3 favorites that I go to as a default when I'm not well. And so the whole situation for me is to become aware. As long as aware, I can catch things early before they go too badly. So that's really important. And on a fraternal level, one of the things that has really been a rock for me are the values of the fraternity: friendship, knowledge, service, morality, and excellence. And I have those at my front door, so that when I'm going out into the world, those are the ideals that I will try and live by each day. Doesn't mean I'm great at them, but it means that at least I have them on my radar screen as something to aspire to. So from that fraternal aspect, fraternity's always been very, very important in my life. That's been really important. And the last thing is gratitude. I am a very lucky individual, and I'm grateful for a lot of things. Sometimes a little prayer goes up, just thank you. Nothing more than that. Sunday nights, I have a gratitude night where I just sit down and I get quiet and I think about the special people in my life. I think about the things that have been, that have gone well during the week. I think about the things that haven't gone well either, because there's usually a message from those too. But it gives me a chance to just be quiet and be with me and appreciate the people that have helped me stay sane and live another day. Colin, over to you.
Wow, thank you. That was very lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think you're right on so many counts. Awareness is really key, and then it's also, we're talking about having, what does it mean to have good mental health? Well, how do we even talk about good mental health? It's such a complex thing, and it's different for everybody. I went around my house actually, and I was asking different people, and the favorite answer that I got was that good mental health is your ability to deal with bad mental health. And going off of that, for me, what it means to have good mental health is or really just mental health, is the capacity to experience the full range of human emotions without getting stuck anywhere. And that's where awareness has been so important for me in my own journey, and it sounds like for you as well, John, because we start to build emotional resilience by just bringing awareness to the ebb and flow, the highs and the lows that just come with living life. I mean, it's something all of us go through. And so the question is, well, what are the ways in which we can appreciate the highs, but then also understand that the lows have their place as well and move through them instead of getting stuck in them. And a really important practice for me has been inner hospitality. So really going out of my way to make myself feel welcome, to experience all of the good and all of the bad. And in terms of what that looks like as a practice, meditation has been so helpful to me. Just sitting and bringing awareness to whatever is going on in the body in the present moment. And anchoring, being anchored in the present, because I find that when I'm feeling anxious, it's usually because I am fixated on something that is happening in the future, even, being nervous for being on a Zoom panel and talking about mental health. And then when I'm feeling really low or, in a kind of more depressed state, it's because I'm thinking or I'm rooted in the past and what's going on, or things that I did, things that I said, a way that I think that I am based on who I was in the past. And so using meditation to anchor in the present, to be compassionate to myself, and to create room for all of the different stuff that I'm feeling, even if I don't exactly know what it is, has been hugely helpful. And then yoga as well. Yoga just, not being a religion or even a physical practice. I mean, the physical aspect is part of it, but yoga in Sanskrit, it means to bind, to come together, to yoke. And it's bringing the body and the mind together to experience the fullness of what it means to be alive in every moment. And then breathing is really, really helpful as well. Just being able to take a deep breath in, deep breath out is another way to kind of bring balance back to the wave of life.
Thank you both. So we heard from John and Colin on this. I'd be interested for the rest of our panelists. What do you do to cope and keep yourself healthy, both in what we might refer to as normal times, as well as during this COVID-19 pandemic?
When it comes to normal times or even the pandemic, I guess the thing to not necessarily cope, but to kind of maintain one's homeostasis is to remember what you enjoy to do that's for fun, right? What are these hobbies? What are these activities that are, like Colin was saying, that bind you, to yourself? And I think it's really crucial to make sure you have hobbies, to make sure you have entertainment that can be done in and outside of the house. With me being in grad school, it's also very difficult to deal with this, this like elite university rigor. And then I go hang out with my friends and they're just like back home and they're like, what do you do for fun? And I don't have an answer. And then when they put me on the spot like that, I know I'm missing out on a very crucial part of myself, and I'm running into the ground eventually. So instead of to cope, right? To cope means that there's something there that's you have to to kind of protect yourself from, to cope, right? To kind of ignore. But I guess the word I would like to use outside of cope is to maintain a kind of equilibrium where you can hear yourself and be aware of yourself while simultaneously trying to understand the moment in time you're in. So for me, sometimes I just play Call of Duty for a long period of time, to be fair. I just do that for about 3 hours and I'm like, wow, I haven't done that in a very long time. On the weekend, of course, or I'll watch some movies or have potlucks in my house where I can have to focus on other people and cook some food and have community. So a lot of the things are things that people think are a waste of time. I don't think those things are a waste of time because they have a place. And if you don't do those things, then you're just a robot. You're just a machine. And if you want to be a machine, I don't think you'll last very long.
Well, oddly as it sounds, I make up my bed each morning, and that's the way I tell myself that the battle has been joined, and I'm not going to let any negative thoughts or enter my head, or that if bed's unmade, it's a signal to me that I can go back to sleep. And so that's how I start my day every day. But don't underestimate the importance of going out and getting some sunshine whenever you can, exercising, and then talking to people. Now I'm old school, and I don't believe that texting is talking to people. You actually have to call them and talk to them and just reminisce about the good times, and that'll improve your state of mind.
Okay. The ways that I cope when I'm not in quarantine are to go to the gym and see people, hang out with people, and really just like make sure that I'm releasing my emotions instead of reinforcing them. One of the biggest things to keep in mind when you're going through any journey with mental health, there's things that like a good run can like release all the emotions I have. But if I the kind of anger or angst or depression or sadness that's in me, and so I have to kind of know those limits of like, all right, what's a good like way for me to get this out, and what's that line between it, like we're saying. Fortunately, living in Los Angeles during the quarantine, I can still run every day, and I can still talk to people and still do a lot of the coping mechanisms that I've been doing. The thing that I always have to watch is to like drink too much and not even notice it, because you're just kind of stuck, and then that like reality sets in and you're like, whoa, I didn't even want to drink this much. So it's just kind of knowing your limits, knowing what helps you release some of those emotions, and like I said, staying away from stuff that reinforces that disconnect.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how different drinking at a Zoom happy hour is to an in-person happy hour. So thanks for pointing that out, Ross.
Yeah.
Ross, you started to talk a little bit about it, but can you talk to us about what the difference is between sadness and depression, and the difference between just being stressed out and having anxiety?
Yeah, I think these are really important topics, because what's been happening in our society today is somebody might go through a really bad like just day or bad event and say like, oh, I have depression, and there's a big difference between those. When somebody feels depressed or upset, or you can go through a breakup, parents divorce, something upsetting, but you know what happened and you know what you need to work on it. You might still need help for that. Totally understandable. Depression, you typically don't have a viable cause. Everything sucks, everything hurts, and you don't know why. You could lay in bed all day, you could lose all energy, you could stop taking care of yourself, you may have thoughts of death or suicide, and it's persisted for weeks or months. So both things, whether you feel depressed or actually have depression, are serious enough for you to talk to somebody about it, but they are very different. And what tends to happen in our society is someone who has a bad day will often the opposite of clinical depression is not happiness. It's vitality. It's having energy to get out of bed and do things you enjoy. And so that's a really big difference. There's also a huge difference in actually having an anxiety disorder. And it's a pretty similar thing. When you feel nervous, there's usually a cause, and nervousness lasts for a short amount of time and goes away. When you have an anxiety disorder, a lot of times it's overwhelming, it's all consuming, And anxiety tends to build and build and build and not go away. And so I think what I'm hearing a lot of from people who are in quarantine now is like, yeah, daily stresses, which are real, but for people who have anxiety disorders, it can be a really, really difficult time. And so I think another way to explain it is like the opposite of nervousness is being calm. The opposite of having like going through an disorder or a panic attack is being able to see reality. So telling someone who's in a panic attack to just calm down is not an effective approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that. John or Glenn, what symptoms might signal a friend may be in need?
Well, I'd say that they tend to be cutting themselves off from others. They're less communicative. They're cutting class. They're not doing things like they used to be, would be some of the signs that would be easy for you to notice.
Yeah, if I can add to that. I have a network of people that I talk to on a regular basis, and I can tell when people are in trouble when they do a couple of things. First of all, they don't answer their phone or they don't answer an email, and that's unusual for them. If you do talk to them and you ask how they are, they say, fine. It's a real cut-off word, fine. It means I don't want to talk about it, I'm fine. That's a giveaway for me. People, another sign is people who are not doing the things that they enjoy. All of a sudden they're locked in, they lock themselves in their room. They don't want to talk, they're sad. You can hear the sadness in their voice, you can see it in their faces. They're just not well. I've got a pretty open relationship with an awful lot of people. And we are a support system where we're not afraid to ask the other person that I'm close to, how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you not okay? And we can expect an honest answer. And I'm lucky that way, but those are long-term relationships, long-term friendships. When I'm speaking with somebody, particularly if I'm speaking to lawyers and I want to know what's going on with them, and they tell me that they're working 18 hours a day and they haven't had a vacation for 6 years or whatever, those are usually giveaways that they're in need of something, some kind of balance and grounding. But I guess the word in summary is isolation. People who isolate themselves and close in and not look outward.
Thank you both for sharing the symptoms. Perhaps for college students, it might look like isolating, as John said, isolating in your room and lacking that balance between schoolwork and social, their family, their friends, and keeping everything in balance sometimes can be pretty tough. Sonnie, what can someone do to support a friend who's struggling with their mental health? And how can you maintain your own mental health while supporting that friend?
Yeah, support's really difficult because support's something that everyone knows they need, but they don't always know how they need it. And that can be very tricky. So I think when it comes down to support for a friend, the ways I've done it, just keep the doors open. I make sure that I say, hey, if there's anything I can do, I'm there around this, and this, around these times, these days. So I know that I'm also protecting my own kind of space. So I know like this is the time I have, and this is the time I've allotted to my friends and like what they need. But then I also want to make sure that I just ask them also, like, what do you need? What do you want? Also, needs and wants are very different. But I try to make sure that what they communicate to me is something I can do in the short term, and we can compile, or not necessarily compile, but compound towards something that's long term. So if that is just like, hey, can we talk every so often? It's like, yes, of course. And if that's, can we talk every Tuesday? Oh, yes, of course. It's like, oh, can we talk every Tuesday over lunch? It's just like, oh, okay. Like, one, you're building a kind of bond, but you're also building someone's, a relationship and that bond, but you're also building up someone's personhood. You know, you're building them up to say like, hey, someone is here for you. And in those times when you're you know, deeply sad or depressed or having a lot of anxious, you want to make sure you can turn to somebody and make sure you know when, if they're not there in that very moment, that they are actually there. Like, you know, they wouldn't necessarily just leave you in the dark. But when it comes to yourself and like being able to create space for others, I think that's really important. To create space and time for people is crucial for any relationship. And being able to be aware enough to be like, okay, I can do this, but how can I do this? Or when can I do this? And is this too much? You know, like as we said earlier, when I was talking about my friend's death, you know, you eventually said, if anything becomes too much, you have to like dip out. That's fine. You know, making sure people have ways in and out is super important. But at the fraternity, I was always the one who was willing to, I'll kind of take all the shots. You know, the fraternity can be a very interesting space nonetheless. And within that space, I was always the one like, I'm the artist, I'm the sad one, so I'm here. So that really broke it down for the people. But then I'll say, hey, text me, email me, or send me a message on Instagram. So there's a little bit of a buffer between being around a bunch of guys who are just rah rah when you actually need to like get in someone's car and just let that out, you know.
The only thing I would add to that is, you know, when somebody's going through something difficult, it can be really hard to approach them and know how to make that comfortable. You know, you're never going to walk up to somebody and be like, hey man, you have a lot of problems. And they're going to be like, yeah, you're right. I have so many problems. Can I just talk about it with you? Like, that's not how it goes. Normally, when you notice somebody has an issue, it's just a lot of confrontation and it's really difficult. So if you want to break down that confrontation, do anything that makes them feel comfortable. You know, whatever you do that's normal. If it's playing video games, if it's hanging out in the same place all the time, like, the more comfortable you make someone, the more they're going to open up to you. The more uncomfortable you make a conversation, the harder it's going to be. So like, if you're really worried about someone and you're like, oh, I'm going to take them for a walk, but you've never gone on a walk with them before, like, the whole thing's going to be uncomfortable. And then the other thing is, to speak to what Sonnie's saying, if you were ever with a brother or a friend and they broke their leg, none of you would think like, oh, I should probably go to a pharmacy and get things to make a cast and take care of their broken leg. Like, we all know to call the ambulance or 911 when somebody breaks their leg. We don't do the same thing with mental health. With mental health, we text people, we stay up all night, we chat with people and try and make it better for them. But sometimes, like, it's broken and they need professional help. And if they don't get that professional help, they keep relying on you to fill that gap. And then you don't have time for yourself, and you really aren't qualified to take care of them anyway. And it creates a lot of problems. So like Sonnie said, make sure you have boundaries for yourself as you're trying to help other people.
Thank you both. Glenn, you've shared that it was about a 20-year period of kind of struggling to come to reality with your illness. What stereotypes and stigmas about mental health do you believe are the most harmful in today's society?
Well,
it's a big question.
Yeah, first I was, you know, raised to that we suffer in silence. You know, if you get the flu, you get whatever, no one wants to hear your complaints, so just suffer in silence. And so that's a little bit of how I was raised. But I think the big concerns are that once you reveal yourself and once you open up, that people will think that you're weak, that you're fragile, that you're not going to be able to have opportunities for leadership, that some of the people that may not be your favorites in the chapter will use it against you, and that you'll just be considered a crybaby, or, you know, someone that's needy. No one, you know, we want to go out to the bar. Do you want to take the depressed guy? That's what your mind's telling you. And, you know, and for 18 years, really, I kept my silence about all these issues that were going on, the messages I had going on in my head. But, and a lot of those messages were just to shut up. That was the main message that I would hear whenever I thought about it. And, but the opposite has been true. Whenever I've revealed myself, whenever I talked about it, and it's still very difficult for me to talk about, I've been warmly embraced by everyone that I've told, and all of my worst fears that were circulating in my head never came to fruition.
Thank you. John, from your professional work, what stereotypes and stigmas do you believe are the most harmful?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics because the Mood Disorders Society of Canada has done extensive work in this area. And I'll point out a few things. If you look at the movies and you look at mental health as it's portrayed, you think of Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You look at people who are out of control. They're dangerous. They're people you do not want to be around. If you look at newspaper reports, you may see, I'm from Canada, so we don't have as many, we may have shootings here. And when we get that, the newspaper reports invariably will say, he or she's suspected of having mental health issues. So you've got the media influence that reinforces this attitude that mental health means that you're dangerous, you can't be trusted, any number of things. That's external. You've also got internal stigma. And internal stigma is basically, if you are not well, you think I'm broken, I'm not good enough. You heap the stigma on yourself, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You then become the person that you don't want to be because you've imposed it on yourself. One of the things that's done in Canada, Bell Canada is the biggest telephone carrier in Canada. Once a year, they have a Bell Let's Talk Day, where anybody who sends a text or any kind of communication through the Bell network, they donate money for mental health programs. And they regularly raise in the tens of millions of dollars on that one day. And the whole message is, let's talk. Let's not do this in silence. Let's not be alone. Let's talk. And I think that's great because you take away the stigma of not talking and being isolated by knowing that if you talk to somebody, they're going to give you a sympathetic ear. They're going to treat you with respect and with love, and they're not going to judge you. So, you know, I'm not gonna keep going. I could go on for a long time about the value of talking, and simply let's talk. That's the message.
Yeah, if I could build off that a little bit, John, I think something to go with stigmas and stereotypes and all those things is also to stay open, right? I was a black dude from West Side Chicago who moved to Iowa, and then I joined a fraternity, and I was just like, oh God, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing here? And for me, it was just like, oh, okay, this is something I'm going to try out. This is something I'm going to see what happens. And I joined this fraternity, and actually Alex Kronk texted me, and I meet all these crazy guys. I'm just like, wow, okay, this is way different than what I expected, and it was way more fruitful than I ever imagined on the planet, right? And one of the things I started to realize was sometimes people know what you need more than you do. And that's a weird thing to say, and it's really tricky. And when you spend a lot of time around some guys, I remember certain nights where guys were like, Sonnie, you need to come out. Like, you have to come out. Like, it's going to be like, come on, come out. And I'll be like, no. Like, I got to do my work, and I'm sad. And like, no, I'm not really feeling it. You know how I am. You know, I'm existential. I'm an artist. Yeah. And then I'll go out, and it's like one of the best nights of my life. And I'm just like, as soon as I got there, I'm just like super ecstatic, super happy that I allowed myself, right? I allowed myself to break out of that. And I allowed people to take care of myself. My mom and my dad once told me, you really care for some people, you really love some people, and you allow them to take care of you. And when you allow people to take care of you and have that kind of trust, that's really important. And also I'm an artist who's in a frat, so that's really confusing for other people, right? That those things don't go together. I'm an artist, a Black one, in a frat from Iowa who also study business. So it's a big thing of hybridity. But the one thing people realize about myself, or that I realize about other people, that those moments when all these things kind of like coalesce into a goblet, a giant pot or stew, is what makes people interesting, and allowing those people to come in and out of your lives, and making sure that it's okay to be outside of things. Like if you're in a frat and everyone's super machismo, well, hey, you don't have to be that way. You just have to find your community within that community. And that's super important, to find the support and your people. My parents speak about people a lot. Like, hey, you got some people out there? And my mom and my dad are simply saying, you got some people that care about you out there? They're watching out for you. And usually those things become some of my best friendships to this day, or from people who maybe go to the bars at Iowa when I didn't want to. And to trust. Trust is really important.
Thank you. Well, we are just about at time. Do we have any final thoughts from any of our panelists?
Yeah, I'd like to just reiterate a couple of amazing things that I heard. Ross, you said how important it is to set boundaries for yourself, especially in terms of wanting to support other people, and that being a tricky thing. And I guess for me, the way that I frame that is, it's not my responsibility to fix anyone, but it is my responsibility to consider them. And in the metaphor I like for that support is kind of like the oxygen mask in a plane, to make sure you put your own on first, and then you can start working to help find a way, or just even listen to other people as they work through theirs.
Yeah, and the thing I was going to say really quickly was, when a lot of the things we're saying is just like in the turbulent times, right? But once you get out of that and you build these friendships and you have these people that you really care about and they're there for you, make sure you call people out on their shit. Honestly, when they're doing things that are toxic and you can see them spiral down, and you have that kind of relationship, I always call my friends out, and they know to expect that, because it's like, you made all this progress to go backwards. No, that's not what we do. That's not what we're doing here. What we are going to do is to keep you on track.
And on that note as well, I think it's important to never underestimate the power of a good question, because it's very easy when we call people out to get defensive. I know I even feel that way. And so posing that in the form of a question, particularly one that's not judgmental, but genuinely driven by curiosity and goodwill, is really powerful.
A huge thank you to all of our panelists. I've shared some resources up on the screen. I'd encourage you to take a quick screenshot of that if you haven't already, and make sure that we're engaging with these resources.
I think John had something quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. When I'm working with people or talking to people who I think are in crisis, what I always do is never leave the conversation with asking them to phone me. I always schedule a time for the next check-in, whether it's the next day or 2 days, not to be overbearing about it, but to just show the person that I care, so that when I leave them, especially if I think they're suicidal, it's almost like a contract with them that they'll be there to talk to me tomorrow or the day after. I just wanted to add that because I found that to be really, really effective in terms of helping people get through tough times, because they often don't. Sometimes people will think that they're bothering you, or they're taking your time, or you shouldn't bother with them. That's not the approach I take. The approach I take is that it's going to be very hands-on and very, very much follow-up. That's all I'll say.
Thanks so much. And John, that reminded me of the 5 for Phi Gamma campaign that's ongoing today. So we encourage you to participate in that. All of the contact information for our panelists is here. So here's another great thing to take a screenshot of. But we do not want you all to miss out on our next session for Day of Brotherhood. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for our panelists.
Oh, really quick, Lauren, I think we have one question in the Q&A. Do we have time for it?
We don't really have time for it now.
Okay. Email me, Alex. I got you.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. See you guys.